The original script for Mysterious Island was merely how to survive on a desert island. It was a wonderful Jules Verne story to read, but it was definitely dated. And in order to keep an audience in a theater for an hour and a half, we had to inject certain elements that we felt from the experience in making the Seventh Voyage were very necessary to Mysterious Island. So I made a series of drawings of visuals that I felt could be included. When we first started considering rewriting the script, we thought we'd inject a prehistoric element. We were going to have the island with many dinosaurs and a prehistoric concept, some of which is still in the picture, only modified. When Cy Enfield came on the picture, we decided that through many conferences that it would be better to bring it up to date and not use the prehistoric concept. So we used the concept of Captain Nemo devising a means of growing wheat 10 feet high and enlarging the crab to account for all these strange creatures on the island. So there's a little mixture of 2 or 3 scripts which ended up in the final picture. In the preliminary stages of the visual effects, I devised a man-eating plant, which was later cut out of the film. It could have been quite a dramatic sequence, and one day I'd hoped to use it in another picture, but it never seemed to get on the screen. When we first decided to look for locations, we thought of the Caribbean because of the palm trees and the wonderful islands that are around there. So Charles sent me on a location hunting spree to examine the possibilities of Tobago, of Trinidad, and the various islands that surround Cuba. To make things much more convenient for shooting, we ended up shooting in Spain. We used the same beach that we had used in the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad and many of the other locations, combined, of course, with matte paintings and double printing and that type of thing. One of the big problems, of course, in the story itself was the escape in the balloon from the Civil War period. And in order to accomplish that, we had to use a great many traveling mats. So we had a combination of a large section built of the basket and the lower part of the balloon for the live action. And then for the miniature sections, to show the completed balloon, we had to use miniatures. We had to use a big miniature tank at Shepperton Studios. We had to make a balloon about 10 feet high to glide over the surface of the water. So it became a rather large excursion into high-speed photography. One section of the picture we showed Shepperton Square, which substituted for the Civil War period of the escape. And in order to achieve that, we had to combine miniature with the actual Shepperton Square in Shepperton. So we had fire engines there giving the rain effects, but for the very long shot where you show the complete balloon, we did that all in miniature. We built an exact duplicate of Shepperton Square and then put the people in through a process of traveling matte. So that was the only real way we could achieve that effect in a storm sequence, because it required so many different cuts in order to achieve the continuity of the story. Okay. The first creature that the men encountered on the island was a giant crab. And to achieve that effect, we bought a crab from Harrod's department store, an edible crab, I believe they call them. And we had it cleaned out and an armature put in its place so that it could be made use of through the stop motion method. It turned out to be one of the most successful sections of the picture. One of the holdovers of the script that we wrote concerning prehistoric animals was the giant bird that they encountered. Actually, it was a known prehistoric concept, so it made it much easier to design. We felt we could keep it in because it was quite an exciting section to animate, and also that we felt it would give a little humor. The bird in its awkward movements, dear Bernie Herrmann sensed that comedy effect, and he put a score in it that made it quite unusual and interesting. I designed the original version of the Nautilus for this particular production. Of course, Jules Verne made a very vivid description in his story about it, which helped a lot. But we wanted to steer away from another film that was made that showed a rather different design of the film. So we had to make it practical from what the submarine was supposed to have done in the previous film, and still get away from the design of the submarine that was well known by that time. The miniature submarine and cave, of course, were built on quite a large scale. The submarine, if I recall, was about 8 or 10 feet long, quite a large miniature. That was necessary because during the collapse of the cave, the pieces of the cave had to fall into the water. And if you don't make a large enough miniature, the splashes get very large, and then it gives away the fact that it was a miniature. The underwater sequence was quite a difficult thing to shoot. We got Egil Waxhold, who is a wonderful underwater cameraman, to do all the underwater photography. We built the sets in Benidorm and sunk them in the bay there. And then, of course, Gil photographed them underwater. It was quite a lengthy thing to do, but it was done as a second unit operation. I think it was most effective in some of the long shots where we wanted to show the sunken continent of Atlantis, or Lemuria, whatever you want to call it. That had to be done in miniature, and then we had to put the people in a form of traveling mat. But we wanted to keep that prehistoric concept of the sunken city on the island in order to keep the picture interesting and on a sort of a fantasy plane. We had a cephalopod in the picture underwater with a great circular shell, which again was a hangover of a prehistoric nautilus. And one of the problems, of course, was to animate all the tentacles so that they looked like they were underwater, which meant very small movements. Sometimes one would have to move each tentacle about less than a millimeter a frame in order to get that subtle underwater feeling. Of course, later we printed over a series of waves and distortion to give the further effect of the underwater shooting. For the ending of the production, we had to have the volcano explode. So we built a lot of miniatures in Spain. This was all shot ahead of the production. So that enabled us to have a visual image of what was going on to show the actors so they'd react properly when we put the two pieces of film together. Mysterious Island was one of the most successful pictures that we made, and it pleases me a great deal to know that people are still enjoying it today.